Welcome to Talking Giants player profiles and projections, and today we have James Bradberry. James Bradberry. I don't know why I did a French accent. That was pretty lame.
That was cool. No, I liked it.
6'1", 212 pounds, 28 years old. Is he the best Dave Gettleman draft pick ever?
That's a great question.
I think it is. And I don't think it's even that hotly debated.
Was McCaffrey a Gettleman draft pick?
I would think Bradberry would be a better draft pick. Especially since he was and when you're including second, he was drafted in the second round and involving that.
Did McCaffrey win an MVP?
McCaffrey? No, he didn't win an MVP.
Offensive MVP?
He might have won Offensive Player of the Year, but even if he did, I'd say James Bradberry is the best Dave Gettleman draft pick of all time.
I'd agree. Yeah.
And then Dave Gettleman said, "I got him once, I got to get him again." Signed a 3-year, $43 million contract, restructured it. So after this year, he's a $20 million cap hit with 7 of dead cap. Something would have to happen crazy for him to not be here at the start of the 2022 season. Per Pro Football Reference in 2020, he allowed 61.5% of his completions against him, which was the highest of his career core in the Football Reference. The years before were 59% and 44%. But it was his lowest yards per completion at 10.4. And you got to think, when this guy is covering the wide receiver one, he allowed 580 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. I mean, imagine if your number one wide receiver had 580 yards and 4 touchdowns. That would be worse than Darius Slayton's season last year.
Yeah.
And we've faced some good wide receivers. I mean, he dominated Allen Robinson. He dominated a lot of good players. And even games where he wasn't dominating, they still DK Metcalf didn't have a great game versus us. So, man, I mean, he is probably the best player on the team.
He 100%, I think, is the best player on the team. He did not allow a reception over 28 yards last year. 28 yards was week 1 against Juju Smith-Schuster. Bobby, do you want to break down that play?
And that was on a rub route. It wasn't even on a rub route. That was on a crosser where Juju Smith did a good job using whatever linebacker or safety as a pick for Bradberry.
So that was week 1, a 28-yarder that James Bradberry allowed on a crossing route, which is so tough to defend in the NFL today, and did not allow a reception over that because the Giants' defensive theme was last year just not allowing the big explosive play, and that's why they were so successful. Calling him the best player on the football team right now, maybe outside of Saquon Barkley, that's not a wrong opinion. According to Pro Football Reference's approximate value metric, which is basically almost think of WAR, wins above replacement, in baseball. Bradberry was the most valuable member of the 2020 Giants. He was the only Giants player to finish with a double-digit AV. This includes out of the quarterback position. And also, it was better than Byron Jones, which the Giants were thinking about signing last year. And then also better than Marlon Humphrey, who was also one of the best cornerbacks in the National Football League last year. James Bradberry played the most amount of snaps in his entire career in 2020. He had allowed less than 600 receiving yards. That's also key too. So despite the allowing a pretty high completion rate, if you want to consider what it looks like in 2018 and 2019, still allowing all less than 600 yards and playing all those snaps is very impressive. Career best 18 pass deflections, tied for second highest in the National Football League, and allowed an elite average depth of target of 9.5 yards. Cornerback 1, allowing each time he's targeted less than 10 yards is very, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he was a dominating factor for the Giants defense from the cornerback spot. And, something we've talked about is the Giants, trying to build their secondary. And they better, because of the edge guys they have right now, aren't good enough to not have a great secondary. But that's what Bradberry comes. And really, it changed the way Patrick Graham was able to call his defense. Because a lot of stuff is shading players to one side or the other. Where are you going to help your players? And James Bradberry is the reason why Isaac Yiadom and Darnay Holmes had not horrible seasons. I know when people say Yiadom, they think, oh, he's horrible. He was probably the worst starter on the team. But for his play, I wasn't mad for Isaac Yiadom for what I expected out of him. And part of that is because they were able to help with the safeties over the top. Darnay Holmes wasn't have to be put in bad situations at the left corner, because a lot of times it was hey, we're going to put our James Bradberry on one side of the field. We're going to shade everything else to the other side, because we know for a fact that I can trust him over there, not just to stop a big play, but he's going to stop the 8-yard curl route too. He's going to stop the out route too. He's going to stop, he's going to be able to jump the rub routes on the opposite side. So he changed the way Patrick Graham was able to call a defense because of how good he was. And, you know, it's crazy that he had his best year last year, and I tweeted about this the other day when we were prepping it for this. It's like it's kind of crazy that Blake Martinez and James Bradberry both got their contracts and then had contract like years, had their best career years after they got their big money.
Well, it's also value. I mean, credit to those football players for not just collecting their money and, just sitting on their laurels and getting their paycheck with their second team, but also it's about great value as well. And specifically with those two players, the Giants are getting great value out of those contracts, and they're hopefully going to be rewarded with some contract extensions maybe at the end of this year because those deals were only 3-year deals. Bobby, speaking of value, having a cornerback one before this past year, I thought of it kind of differently, where I looked at a guy like Byron Jones, who never got targeted, and I'm like, that's a lockdown, like Darrelle Revis type of corner that I want to have on my football team. I've kind of changed my line of thinking, where James Bradberry, even before this year, was a cornerback that did get targeted a decent amount. And I am now kind of flipping my focus to wanting to prioritize having that Byron Jones type of corner that never gets targeted. Because guess what? NFL teams, they're still going to throw the ball. They're just going to throw the ball to a different part of the field. When James Bradberry can make plays on the football and deflect passes, or I'm still trying to figure out how he came down with that interception against Allen Robinson week 2 against Chicago. When he can make plays on the football like that, and guess what? When he's being targeted, then the weaker spots of the team, like Isaac Yadam, like a rookie Darnay Holmes, those guys aren't getting targeted. But when Bradbury's getting targeted, I can trust that he's, number one, not going to allow a big play, and number two, that there's a good chance that maybe he can have a pass breakup, pass deflection, etc., etc. So I've kind of changed philosophically how I think of what I want my cornerback one to do. Do I want him getting targeted 150 times a year? No. But somewhere between the 70, 80, 90 target mark does not mean that my cornerback one is allowing guys to get open all the time because he's being targeted so much.
But even with that, he allowed 56 catches on 91 targets. So not the worst completion percentage, but 56 catches. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Can our wide receiver 2 get that number? I don't, can we expect that, if healthy? So he didn't allow a ton of completions either, man. I mean, granted, he missed one game with not with COVID, but being close to someone that have COVID. But he had a dominating year. And you brought up that Allen Robinson interception. He got an interception. He gave an interception to Julian Love earlier in that game.
Yeah.
Julian Love's interception was because of James Bradberry. So, I mean, it's the way he's able to, like I said, not give up the big play and can play off, but he closes the gap so quickly. And it's because I think he's just smarter than everyone else. I think he's I know when the ball's coming. I know when this route is going to break and when to close that gap. It's not just being where Adoree Jackson might be a read and react type corner. And I want to talk about how it works with him and Adoree. Where Adoree may be more of a read and react. It's where Bradberry's no, I'm going to be there. I know when this is going to happen and where that guy's going to be, and I'm going to beat him to that spot. And that's how. I mean, he should have had a couple more interceptions because of plays like that.
Yeah, I want to hear.
Ones versus Amari Cooper are the ones that stick out in my head. It's he was beating Amari Cooper to the spot.
I want to hear what you have to say about how he kind of fits with Adoree Jackson, because also part of me remembers watching the film from Carolina, and he was playing a lot of off-ball coverage, playing, 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, 5 to 7 yards off the line of scrimmage, and knowing, there's a chance that Patrick Graham may want to play more physical this year, may want to play in more press man, and we do. And as we know, if you listen to the show, I say this stat all the time, how the Giants ran a ton of cover 3 last year. So I don't know if James Bradberry, and I'm saying this as an I don't know because I'm not as much of a film buff as Bobby is, I don't know if James Bradberry was put in those situations where he was playing press man at the line of scrimmage a lot last year, but can we kind of transition that, and can we also expect James Bradberry to seamlessly transition to playing in more of an aggressive press man if Patrick Graham does want to go that route?
Yeah, because every time Bradberry was in press man, he was good.
Boom.
Love it. I talked about the rub routes. There's one versus Seattle that really sticks out, where it's a play made to get your number one wide receiver free. And Bradberry reads it, reacts it, plays over the top of it correctly, and beats his guy there. It's on a slant flat. So, yeah. And I really do think him and Adoree Jackson are going to mess with wide receiver one's head. Because they're different corners. You know, where Bradberry is bigger and more physical and more like, hey, I'm going to know where the spot's going. Where Adoree's that speed. And you can beat Adoree Jackson off the line, but you're still not going to beat him on that play. Even if your name's Tyreek Hill. Like, he's going to be able to be with you step for step. So you may think you've won off the line of scrimmage and you have a big play coming, but here comes Adoree trailing and closing in on a play. So, you know, Giants wide receivers have talked about in camp. He's like, they are very different corners. Both very good. James Bradberry obviously better, but they are very different corners. And I think that's going to mess with wide receiver one's head. Like, I don't know what I'm getting when I leave the huddle. Like, I don't know what type of coverage I'm going to get on this. And that makes a difference. That you're hearing your route in the huddle, and it's like, okay, from now until I get to the line of scrimmage, I got to decide what type of release I'm using. Like, that stuff matters. That messes with the wide receiver's head. Just not having that consistency, and I can't wait to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Excited. James Bradberry is probably the PPP where it's probably the simplest, where this dude's good. He was just put number 74 on the NFL Top 100, which I feel like that's the right spot for him. But also, if you are one of the top 5 corners in the National Football League, I think you should be ranked higher. But the fact that this was the first year where he started to enter the conversation, 2020, that is, first year that he entered the conversation, I think that number 74 ranking is fair. But after this year, if this Giants defense is a top 5 unit like we're expecting them to be, and James Bradberry is still doing James Bradberry things, and you know, maybe he's the same or he gets a little bit better with the addition of Adoree Jackson, and also better safety play because there's 3 safeties now. Xavier McKinney almost works as a free agent acquisition. You know, if the play continues to sustain itself and we look at him and we look around the National Football League and say, this guy's a top 5 player in his position, you know, let's get that player ranking up more, and this dude will get more national recognition, which is that's what I want for James Bradberry this year. More national recognition as one of the top corners in the National Football League.
Well, it'll definitely come when, you know, we play that first playoff game and he's shutting down whatever number 1 wide receiver we're going against. That is speaking that into existence. All right, we appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. Until then, let's go Big Blue.